Have you ever noticed something strange about Toothless? By the end of How to Train Your Dragon, every dragon bows before him. The villains call him the Alpha. DreamWorks themselves describe him as the King of Dragons. But go back to the very first movie, and you'll find something that doesn't make any sense. There isn't a single moment that suggests Toothless was ever supposed to become the ruler of every dragon alive. No prophecy, no ancient destiny, no mysterious birthright, nothing. In fact, the Toothless we first met wasn't introduced as a future king at all. He was simply a wounded night fury, trapped in a forest by a boy who had absolutely no idea he was about to change the entire dragon world forever. So how did one injured dragon become the Alpha? Was this DreamWorks' plan all along? Or did something happen during the making of the trilogy that completely changed Toothless's destiny? Because once you start following the clues, you realize his rise to power wasn't as straightforward as most fans believe. It was built one decision at a time, and it all starts with something the first movie never even mentions. An alpha dragon. When the original How to Train Your Dragon released in 2010, the story was surprisingly simple. It wasn't about kings, it wasn't about dragon hierarchies, and it definitely wasn't about Toothless leading an entire species. The movie tells the story of two outsiders, a Viking who doesn't belong, and a dragon everyone fears. Their friendship changes Berk forever. That's the entire emotional core of the film. Even when Toothless performs incredible feats, outrunning every dragon, mastering impossible aerial maneuvers, or defeating the monstrous Red Death, he's never treated as something greater than a Night Fury. He's extraordinary because of his bond with Hiccup, not because of any special title, and that's important. Because if DreamWorks had always intended Toothless to become the King of Dragons, this would have been the perfect place to hint at it. A mysterious legend, an old Viking story, a dragon reacting differently to him. Anything, but none of it exists. The idea of an alpha simply wasn't part of the story yet, and that's where everything begins to change. Several years later, DreamWorks returned with How to Train Your Dragon 2. On the surface, it looks like a bigger adventure, bigger battles, bigger dragons, bigger villains. But beneath all of that, the filmmakers quietly introduced an entirely new piece of dragon mythology, the Alpha. For the first time, we learn that dragons don't just live together. They follow a ruler, a creature powerful enough to command every dragon around it. That role belongs to the Bewilderbeast, a dragon so enormous that even the strongest dragons obey its call without hesitation. Suddenly, the world of How to Train Your Dragon becomes much larger than it was before, and without most people realizing it, Toothless is now standing inside a story that operates by completely different rules, because once an alpha exists, someone can replace it. Then comes the battle that quietly changes the entire trilogy. At first, it looks like a fight between heroes and villains, but it's actually something much bigger. Drago doesn't just control dragons, he controls the Alpha. And because the Alpha controls every dragon, whoever defeats it changes the balance of the entire dragon world. When Toothless finally breaks free, everything begins to build toward one unforgettable moment. He doesn't overpower the Bewilderbeast because he's larger. He isn't older. He isn't stronger in the traditional sense. He's younger than almost every ancient dragon surrounding him. Yet somehow, he refuses to submit. Instead, he does something no dragon had managed before. He defeats the creature every other dragon obeys. And, in that exact moment, something extraordinary happens. Every dragon lowers its head, not to the Bewilderbeast, to Toothless. Without saying a single word, the movie tells us everything. The throne has changed hands. The Night Fury who couldn't even fly without Hiccup's invention has just become the new Alpha. But here's the part almost nobody talks about. That wasn't just a victory inside the story. It also marked the moment DreamWorks permanently changed Toothless's role in the franchise. Because after this battle, he would never simply be Hiccup's dragon again. He had become something much bigger. But here's where the story gets even more interesting. If you look behind the scenes, you'll notice something surprising. Toothless didn't become the Alpha because of one single decision. He became the Alpha because the entire trilogy kept evolving. During the development of How to Train Your Dragon 2, director Dean DeBlois experimented with very different versions of the story. One early idea would have made Hiccup's own mother, Valka, the film's central antagonist. The emotional conflict would have focused much more on Hiccup's family than on his partnership with Toothless. Eventually, that version was abandoned. Why? Because it pulled attention away from what had always been the heart of the franchise: Hiccup and Toothless. As the story changed, so did the mythology surrounding it. Drago became the main villain. The Bewilderbeast became the embodiment of dragon leadership. And for the first time, DreamWorks introduced the idea that dragons weren't simply surviving together. They were following a king. That one creative decision changed everything. Because now, the story needed someone worthy of inheriting that role. And whether the filmmakers realized it at first or not, there was only one dragon who had earned it. Think back to everything Toothless had already been through. He wasn't born the strongest, he wasn't the biggest. He certainly wasn't feared because of his status. In fact, the very first time we meet him, he's lying helpless in a forest, unable to fly, completely dependent on the boy who shot him down. Every step forward had to be earned. He learned to trust. He learned to fight beside humans. He sacrificed his own safety to save Hiccup again and again. By the time he faced the Bewilderbeast, he wasn't just stronger. He had become something no other dragon in the series had ever shown. A leader who inspired loyalty instead of demanding obedience. And that's the exact opposite of Drago's Alpha. Drago ruled dragons through fear. Toothless united them through trust. The battle wasn't simply strength against strength. It was two completely different ideas of leadership colliding. And in the end, trust won. The proof becomes even clearer in the hidden world. Notice how nobody questions Toothless's position anymore. Grimmel doesn't hunt him simply because he's the last known Night Fury. He specifically targets him because he's the Alpha. The one dragon capable of leading every other dragon alive. Even DreamWorks' official material describes Toothless as the dragon who now dominates all dragons. Dean DeBlois himself openly referred to him as the Alpha Dragon. At that point, this wasn't fan theory anymore. It had become official. The injured Night Fury from the first film had completely transformed into the King of Dragons. But here's something fascinating. Even after becoming Alpha, Toothless never behaves like a king in the way we'd expect. He never demands loyalty. He never forces dragons to obey him. He leads the same way Hiccup always did, by protecting others first. That's exactly why the ending of the Hidden World feels so different. When Toothless leads every dragon into the Hidden World, it doesn't feel like a conquest. It feels like a responsibility. For the first time in his life, he isn't just protecting one village, he's protecting an entire species. So, was Toothless always supposed to become Alpha? Based on everything we actually know, the answer is more complicated than most fans think. The first movie gives us no evidence that becoming Alpha was Toothless's original destination. The Alpha mythology only appeared later, as the world, the villains, and the story itself became much larger. But once DreamWorks introduced that mythology, everything about Toothless naturally pointed in one direction. Not because he was the last Night Fury, not because destiny chose him, and not because of some ancient prophecy. He became Alpha because every challenge prepared him for it. Every loss, every battle, every sacrifice, every lesson Hiccup taught him. They all led to that single moment when every dragon bowed their head. Looking back now, it's hard to imagine the trilogy ending any other way. The dragon who began the story trapped beneath a simple net, ended it carrying the weight of an entire world. Maybe becoming Alpha wasn't the destination when the journey began, but as the story evolved, there was no one else who could have earned that crown. And honestly, that's what makes Toothless's journey so unforgettable. If you enjoyed this deep dive, let me know which How to Train Your Dragon mystery we should uncover next. And if there's a hidden detail or behind-the-scenes secret you've always wondered about, leave it in the comments. You never know. It might become our next investigation.